Welcome into another edition. I'll tell you, early on in this 2025 college football season, there are some great stories going on the FBS level and then down through FCS. One of them is happening in our own backyard that around the country folks may not realize. Frankly, around our parts, maybe folks aren't aware of what the Presbyterian Blue Hose have been able to achieve in the first 2 weeks of the season. They're 2-0 against a couple of Southern Conference teams. They went on the road to win those games, but PC is a Division I program, FCS level. They play in the Pioneer League. They're a non-scholarship program. If you're in the Southern Conference, you're a Furman, a Wofford, and so forth. You have 63 scholarships. That's been the number in the FCS level. That may change over the years with how RevShare will work with scholarship limits. But the point is, there's scholarship football and there's non-scholarship football in D1. And the Presbyterian Blue Hose have figured things out in a fourth season under Steve Englehart, their head coach. He's kind enough to join us. Coach, thanks for coming in to the show. You're in your office at your football complex. We're taping this on the Monday after a second straight win against a Southern Conference team. And one of PC's really long rivals, I would think if you look back in the history books, there are some classic games that longtime fans will remember or heard their parents or grandparents talk about. But what a win that was. And just take me back through a game on Saturday in which you guys were down by a couple of scores. You were down by 21 points at one point, but into the second half, two-possession game. You eventually win it in overtime. But how did this one play out? Another upset for a second straight week.
Yeah, we knew we were playing a really good football team in Furman and very well coached, and have a lot of respect for them and their coaching staff and what they do, there. And we really just got off to a slow start in all three phases, really. And their quarterback, I thought played an outstanding, first half, and I thought that we were really outmatched a little bit in our skill positions. I thought their defensive backs were doing a really good job on our wide receivers, and then vice versa. I thought their wide receivers were getting open and, needed to tighten up the pressure, a little bit, and thought we made some really good halftime adjustments, and really our kids just kind of just kept hanging in there and stuck with it, and was able to get a turnover before the end of the half when we were down 21 to cut it to 14 going into the half. And then that's where senior, leadership just kind of took over at halftime. And, I didn't have to say a lot to them at half. I thought that for the first time, probably since I've been here, where you had, the player leadership really step up at halftime and, and really just, brought the team together and, said that they weren't going to be denied, and was really proud of them, the way they kind of took the bull by the horns. We say all the time that bad teams are led by nobody, good teams are led by coaches, and great teams are led by players. So I thought our player leadership was outstanding and really came out the second half after some great adjustments by our defensive coordinator, Dan Owen, and did some really good things defensively. Got a lot of 3-and-outs and tightened up the coverage a little bit, and then really, sent some more pressures, at the quarterback and gave him some different looks and tried to get in his face a little bit. And then obviously, we were able to, to get some scores, but, we turned the ball over a few times and felt like we had opportunities, really all game, but just, kept letting them, slip by. But just kept hanging in there, and got a few things go our way and got into overtime. And there was no doubt that when we got into overtime, if we won the toss and elected to go second, that if they scored on the first possession, that we would go for two if we scored, and wanted to not get in a back and forth with them. I thought that their kicking game, they have one of the best kickers in the country, I believe. So didn't want to get in a back and forth with that, particularly, if you got to 2-point conversions and things like that as well. So felt like we had a good play for our 2-point play and felt like we could win it there. And luckily Nate Levicki made a great catch to give us our second SoCon win of the year, which is, I think really unheard of. When we beat Wofford a couple years ago, was the first time a Pioneer League team had beaten a SoCon team, and so just proud of our guys and the way that they continue to battle, the entire game, and keep believing in each other and loving on each other, and was able to come through with a hard fought victory, and um, just proud of them, really.
So you mentioned it sounds like overtime was scripted then. Defer if you had the opportunity to. Let them get the first ups. They score and they kick the extra point, so they're up by 7. The fact that I believe Hurst, your quarterback to Levicki, that was the combo for the touchdown and then for the 2-point conversion, if I've got that right.
Yeah.
It's a gutsy call. I get it, and we often see teams that maybe feel like, you don't want Ian Williams to run out there for Furman and have a chance at a field goal eventually. But did you have any doubts, or are you so convicted? Maybe you'd done that with PC in your previous years or your previous head coaching stop.
No, wasn't conflicted at all, about it really. After the weather delay, or actually during the weather delay, we had talked. We had the ball at the 8-yard line, I think, going out after the weather delay, and we were down by 10. And I thought really, I think there's about 6.5 minutes to go, and I thought really if we scored a touchdown on that possession, potentially going for 2 there, that way we would only be down by 2 and have a chance to win the game with a field goal. But we ended up settling for a field goal there, and then when we scored the touchdown to tie it, it was about 3.5 minutes to go. And I thought that was a little bit too much time to go for 2 at that point, and thought thought we should tie it. I didn't want to go for 2 and then them kick a long field goal, really to win it. So I just thought that, maybe we'd just go ahead and tie it. And then if we can get the ball back, great. And go down with a chance to score. But we did get the ball back, but then didn't do much with it. I think we got 1 first down. And so, it was talked about plenty of times before. I think when you're on the road and you have the momentum like we did, being down 21 and coming back, and we really had all the momentum, I just felt like if we could just win the game there. I did that. A similar thing against when I was at Florida Tech in our second year, 2014. We went and played Bethune-Cookman, highly ranked, and we scored with very little time left, 15 seconds to go, and an extra point would have put it into overtime, and a 2-point conversion would have won it. And I felt like at that point, once again on the road against a FCS opponent, to go for the win. And unfortunately, we didn't get that 2-point conversion and ended up losing by 1. So I looked like the dummy at that point. But a lot of people said it's a gutsy call. I really don't think it was all that. I really don't think it was all that gutsy. If anything, it'd be more gutsy to kind of continue to play the game. I think, I think that just having a chance to win it with 1 play and not let their offense back out, I think was the right move. And I would do it 100 times over again in that situation. And, you trust the guys and our defense on the sideline. That's what they wanted as well. We have every week we do an overtime drill, or what we call a blue hose drill, which is a red zone drill. So our defense kind of knows what we do in the red zone. And it was funny because all the guys on the defensive side of the ball, the first play to Kibbe in overtime, they were calling out the play before they even saw it. They knew what we were going to do, and I think that just shows that not only do we trust our guys to go execute, but I think the whole team, defense, offense together, they trusted that it was going to happen. So the defense was all about it. They wanted to go for the win as well.
To me, a hidden stat in the game, you held them to 107 yards rushing, and Clay Hendricks will be the first to tell you that he feels like he's better on the offensive line in the running game. Speaks volumes because, again, I know you got some good dudes on your roster, but the non-scholarship thing just resonates with me. What was the key to stifling their running game?
Well, it's funny because, on Thursday, we have a Thursday night meeting and kind of go over the keys to the game. And, I told the team then I felt like one of the keys of the game was going to be who rushed the ball the best, and I think we rushed the ball for 5.8 yards a carry, 167 yards, and we held them to about 3.8 yards a rush.
3.1.
I really just think that Yeah, 3.1. So I really think that our D line is a veteran D line. Robert Porter and Carter Sidlowski. We're pretty beefy up there. We have a couple smaller guys as well, but I think that they have great fundamentals and technique, and we're able to get off blocks. And I think our linebackers did a great job of just identifying, what was coming at them. And then obviously in the second half is when we really kind of shut down the run. And that was just due to some adjustments and more pressures that our defensive coordinator was bringing.
Well, we just showed video of your quarterback. A year ago, I did your opening game down at Mercer. Speaking of weather delays, remember we were delayed for like an hour and a half before that one. And you ran out a kid named Colin Hurst at quarterback for some of that game. He grew up in the shadow of where the Miami Dolphins and the Miami Hurricanes played down there in Florida. Great get. You have Florida in your past, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, the state of Florida in your past. But in this era, it's instinct. You've got a great kid like that at a non-scholarship program. Credit to him, credit to you for having him come back. And what a good quarterback he is. How hard was it to keep him? And you've got to be happy to be able to have him guiding your offense.
Yeah, Colin's great. I tell you, when we recruited him out of high school, at Western High School down there, and Coach Rack, and we've gotten some kids from there. But he, great player. He tore his ACL in high school, his senior year. So, was cut short there a little bit his senior year. As his stature is not, overwhelming. He's a smaller guy, and I think he fell under the radar because of a couple of those things. But we just watched him on film, and he just throws such a catchable ball, and we liked how fast he got the ball out of his hands, and really thought that he could turn into a really good player. And came here, didn't even get cleared until maybe his third or fourth week, his true freshman year, and played on the scout team, and just learned and grew, and then last year had an injury at quarterback, and he went in and just did a great job. And then obviously the way he played in the last 5 games of the year, I think 74% completion with no turnovers in the last 5 games, and just really did an outstanding job. And the best thing about him is he's a great he has great instincts. He sees the field pre-snap and can identify things really quick, and doesn't hold on to the ball too long, gets the ball into his playmaker's hands. And I think that he understands that we have a lot of guys that can make plays for him, and it doesn't do him much good to sit there in the pocket and hold on to the ball. So just get the ball out to the playmakers, and he's going to continue to have a great year. He learned a lot in this game. I think that his confidence in this game was a little shaken at times, but he learned how to battle back. And the only thing that we keep preaching is eliminate the fear of failure, and move on to the next play. And you got to self-talk a little bit, and tell yourself that you're the best player on the field every single snap, and I think that that's what he did, and he showed a lot of resiliency to overcome some of those bad decisions / they made some good plays too. It wasn't all bad decisions. They made some good plays. So, but he just kept battling. So, proud of him, the way he continued to battle, and he's going to have a great year for us.
Well, Coach Steve Englehart is making something at PC with some of the challenges other programs in D1 don't have to go through. And in his previous life, previous head coaching stop, he also had to make something out of, not a whole lot. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk more about what he's been able to accomplish so far in his run with the Blue Hose when we continue after this on All Access. Welcome back. We're talking with Presbyterian College head football coach Steve Englehart. Opening win against the Mercer Bears on the road when they scored, in the mid-teens to win. And then they won at Furman this past Saturday, as we're talking on the Monday after that game, needing 39 points in overtime. So you've been able to win a low-scoring game and a high-scoring game. Before you got to Presbyterian 4 years ago, you were the head coach at Florida Tech. That was a startup D2 program. You actually had a series with PC. I remember watching some of those games and what an impressive ball club you put together. At Presbyterian, they're a D1 program in the Pioneer League with other schools that go from coast to coast that don't give scholarships but still get a bid to the FCS playoffs. So you know what they're going up against when they play outside of conference. And at Florida Tech, it was a D2 startup. So let's start back with that experience, a school there, I believe in the Melbourne, Florida area. And I'm of the impression that maybe you were having to use the field over at Astronaut High maybe early on for some games. But take me through the process of building that program, which eventually, through no fault of yours, was ended right after the pandemic because of all the issues that they had to go through.
Yeah, that was a fun time, in my life to get to be a head coach again. I was a head coach at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, Division III school, so no scholarships in Indiana. And then after a year as the offense coordinator at Indiana State, got the opportunity to go down to Melbourne, Florida, and what a great community. The school is about 5 minutes from the beach, so it was great to recruit to. Our official visits we would have at a hotel right there on the beach, and so we were able to build something pretty quick there. Obviously, we were the only Division II program in the state of Florida. And a lot of those kids, if they weren't going to, UCF or USF and getting recruited by MAC schools, some of them would want to just stay in the state of Florida. And, Division II, we had scholarships, so we were able to help and be able to manage, that. But had a lot of great talent to recruit from. We never had to stay all night recruiting anywhere because we recruited, straight up and down 95. We were centrally located right on 95, right in between Jacksonville and Miami. And then it was an hour drive to Orlando or 2-hour drive to Tampa. So, it was a great recruiting area, and we were able to build it pretty quick. And I was hired in 2011 there, and then we had a practice season in 2012. So brought in about 80 freshmen and just had a practice season, kind of like a spring ball, 2012, and then started in 2013 in the Gulf South Conference, which is really considered the SEC of Division II at the time. It was North Alabama and West Alabama, Delta State, Valdosta State. So really tough conference, and had some success and was able to, have a winning season or year two and, continue to build. And then in year four, had in 2016, went to the playoffs, which is tough to do out of that conference. And then went to the playoffs again in 2018. Before they shut down the program in 2020. But a lot of fun to be able to build that. And we played at Palm Bay High School, for our games. And we had our own practice facility that I was able to have a lot of say in and how we built and build our own field house. And, but yeah, shut down during COVID. It's a big international school, so really worried about international students being able to come back to school after COVID. And unfortunately, a financial decision that they made. But 2 years later, in 2022, was hired here, and excited to kind of take over this program. And in a lot of ways, it was harder than building from scratch. There was already a lot of things here that was a negative about the program or whatever, and a lot of changes had been made going from Division II to the Big South, and then dropping scholarships and going to the Pioneer League. And I was the third coach in a year.
Yeah.
So it was just really a lot to overcome. But that's why I'm so proud of these seniors that have been here for 3 years now, and going into their fourth season, and what they've had to overcome has been really special to see.
When we interviewed you after the Mercer win for our sportscast on the news last week, you did mention the 30 seniors who stuck it out. So kind of giving me an idea as to the challenges. As you mentioned, there are challenges when you do a startup Division II program. In the case of PC, as you noted, they went from D2 to D1 right around 2007. Actually had to go back and do the paperwork over again at one point. But it's not as if they had not had scholarships in the past and then were returning to that. They'd been a scholarship program as a Division II program. And so that had to be a really hard adjustment. You got there after that process had begun, but that's something you now had to sell an alumni base that was used to thinking that they were able to get in the same living rooms as a lot of other FCS programs that give scholarships. Not that you can't, but it's probably in a different way. So some of the challenges of competing, especially outside of the conference, within your league, a Davidson, Jacksonville, so forth, they're not doing scholarships. But what are some of the challenges that you deal with trying to build a winning non-scholarship D1 program that you hope to win your league and get to the playoffs?
Well, it's certainly a challenge, not having scholarships. And, I don't know if you've seen our cost of attendance, but it's not,
It's
necessarily
not cheap. No.
cheap to come here.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. It's not only a challenge, but, once they get here, you see sometimes how much they struggle and financially, and, parents struggle financially because they want to be here to not only get the education, but to have a chance to play Division I football. And, there's a lot of Division IIs in the area. So you're competing and recruiting against Division IIs that are given scholarships. And so you got to kind of sell the D1 dream. And, obviously the conference, we're able to go to a lot of different places. I think that's attractive to them. The fact that we, go to San Diego, we go to Butler and Indianapolis, and Dayton, Ohio, and St. Thomas, and Drake in Iowa, New York. So we're all over the place. But so I think that is attractive, to some of them. But at the same time, it's hard in regards to just, the money part of it. It's always the money. We can recruit the heck out of kids, but once you get the family, underneath the dining room table and you start talking money, those are hard conversations. And,
Yeah.
And it's tough because these kids are doing so much to represent, the brand, the Blue Hose brand, and they work extremely hard. But they sometimes feel like they're maybe not getting rewarded for it. But
yeah. No, I know it can be tough. It can be a difficult scenario. By the way, you mentioned St. Thomas. I'm sure a parent or two over the years have said, "Oh, that's really cool in the Virgin Islands," and you've got to say, "No, that's the one in Minnesota." But we digress.
Yeah,
I think it's a curiosity for me. With non-scholarship, are you guys allowed to do the new rev share and/or NIL? Is that an option?
So we do have we can have NIL. We have started a collective, the Garnet and Blue Collective. It's minimal. Some people still look at that, and NIL has a stigma because they only see what's on, social media or what's in the news about, a Alabama quarterback or
Sure.
USC quarterback, and how much money they're getting, in the Big Ten or the SEC. We're talking about, we might get, maybe $15,000, $20,000 total in a whole year.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about giving a kid $500,
Yep.
$1,000, and that's really just for some spending money to help relieve, or maybe they put that on their student loan, or help buy their books or a computer.
Yep.
It's something that's really minimal. It does help. And our retention, that's the proudest thing that I've been, of being here, has with our staff, is our retention. Because we don't have much to give them, but we give them a lot of love, and I think that we have a culture, of caring for one another, and, those kids just, that they end up staying, and not leaving because of the type of culture that we have, and they know that we have their best interest in heart. And so, we can give them a little bit of money, but it's not much. And, and it may only be, 10 to 12 guys, on the team. So,
Sure.
98% of them are paying the way.
Well, and I think the way you mentioned how the NIL breaks down for you, I would think a lot of folks within college athletic administration and beyond to the fan base, back about a decade plus ago, when the conversations really started to begin and get momentum in Division I about paying the players something. Cost of attendance was the first term we heard. I think the vision was to probably pay an athlete $500, $1,000 maybe a semester. And of course, it's gone down the road that it has. And also at the same time, it tells me if you've got the retention, you've got kids who are serious about getting a degree, which I think is what this is still all supposed to be about. So speaks a lot. And, nothing wrong with having a degree from Presbyterian College.
No, it's a great degree, and obviously our kids will come away with that. But I do think that you're right. I think when, I was always a fan of NIL. Ever since, I mean, I wrote a paper about it when I was in college, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, maybe, so it was one of those things that I always believed that, for a kid to have an opportunity, if who's to say if a Ford dealership in town, wants to pay a kid $1,000 to do a commercial spot for them, that they can't do that, and so I was always a fan of it, but now it's gotten to be out of hand, and the way that it came about, it became an instant recruiting tool, and I think that's where it went wrong. It shouldn't be about recruiting. It should be about, once a kid is here and makes a name for himself, if the community wants to support him, and that kid wants to support businesses, to be able to make a little extra money. But we can go down a rabbit hole with that whole thing, and I don't know how much it'll ever change. I think we've opened the Pandora's box, and it's not going to change much. Hopefully there starts to be some of the regulations, but I'll just, with our alumni base, so many of them want to go back to scholarship, and what I've kind of been telling them, NIL is really just a way that we can at least help support some of these kids that are paying their way.
Yep. Well, Coach, thanks so much for joining us. Bang-up job to start. And as you noted earlier, 3 Southern Conference wins over the past 2+ seasons now, and on the road at Wofford a couple of years ago. Then to start out 2025, wins at Mercer, the preseason SoCon favorite, and they were a top 15 team, and then at Furman last week. Steve Englehart is a graduate of Indiana State, so you're trying to become maybe the second most famous athletic alum after a guy named Larry Bird from the school called the Sycamores in Terre Haute. But Coach, thanks so much. Best of luck to you the rest of the year, and really appreciate you coming on the show.
All right. Thanks a lot, Pete.